Okay, so I'd like to welcome actually Fabricio to start Masterclass today, and we're with actually the way I remember we met Fabricio was we had a talk with Natasha a few weeks back,
Really?
and I saw that Fabricio had actually engaged on one of our posts. So I said, "Oh, hey Fabricio, let's can we have a talk with you too as well?" And the reason I got actually really excited about this idea of talent development was I wasn't even sure what it was, but this goes back even further a few weeks where we had a lot of interesting discussions with employees of Uber. So we had been speaking with people who worked at Uber, and I found that there was incredible talent and incredible willingness to
Mhm.
share at Uber. And so basically, we found Natasha. We talked about talent development, and Natasha pointed us into this really interesting framework about situational leadership, and
Yep.
talked about like the four quadrants of situational leadership. And I thought that I was so inspired by that actually that we started a leadership development course here in our company. So we noticed that we did not have the most advanced leadership inside our company, but with some of the topics that we had discovered with Natasha, we at least had the framework to start building. So that inspired me to continue my I guess discovery of leadership development. This is how we know Fabrizio now. So
Yep.
kind of just as an icebreaker, Fabrizio, I wanted to ask, how would you summarize your time at Uber? Like you've been there and I noticed also you had worked all over Latin America. I think you're Argentinian by origin, right? And now
I know.
you're working in Mexico City. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your career history.
Sure. I mean, about my career history is, as I said, I'm from Argentina. I started there when I started in the corporate world when I was like 18 for an outsourcing company, and that was the first place where I did my corporate career, in which I ended up as a talent acquisition supervisor. I was 21 back then, and since then I've been working in human capital. And I worked for many, many projects. I took a lot of temporary contracts that I had hand in order to like gain more experience. And in the last experiences that I had, it was as a HR business partner for Unilever, then as an HR business partner for Mercado Libre, and the last one before the one I'm currently in, it was with Uber when I worked there as an L&D manager for LATAM, specifically focused on leadership development. And now I'm working for a fintech company that is based in Mexico that's called Alpha Credit. And I'm an associate director for people, and I'm responsible for the people strategy for the technology team. So basically, I mean, for given Mercado Libre, Uber, and now Alpha Credit, I mean, I'm being focused on high tech companies. I've been like really focused on leadership development, culture management, change management, and organizational development. Those are the fields in which I've been specializing myself almost organically. Those are the topics that I always felt that I was like more able to manage well and to get passionate about and to learn and to experiment and to bring new ideas. So like in line with Natasha, I'm a people development practitioner with a lot of focus on leadership and culture.
Excellent.
So those are like the two pillars that I manage the most. And Uber for me, it was like doing an MBA. I always say that. I mean, there's a big, yeah,
Okay. Well, why did you?
there's
That's actually a very very interesting topic. Actually, I noticed a lot of people, and I did notice that there was a Harvard Business School accreditation on your LinkedIn from Uber from
mhm.
executive education. And can you tell me more about why Uber was like having an MBA for you?
Sure. I mean, like working at Uber was like for me one of the best experiences in my whole career, and I'm 100% sure of that. I'm grateful and I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to be part of that company because Uber has really built a world-class culture to be part of. The way of working, the organization, the leadership, the practices, the technology, the innovation, the rhythm of the business. I mean, everything is like really unique. And Uber is a company that have been like evolving and changing since the very beginning. and it has always been concerned for talent and for cultural fit, and they have a big cultural program. They care about culture as not many companies have been doing during the past few years. I mean, and they have been working for world-class practices around culture management. So that's what made Uber such a unique place to be part of. And I think that the product and the business are like really disruptive. So everything that you do there, most of the time, is the first time that it's been done. So most of the positions are like dealing with new challenges or with unprecedented challenges, and you have to like apply everything you know. You have to look for benchmark and new practices. You need to source for ideas that no one else has, or new ideas, in order to actually succeed in that company. Because since you have a lot of talented people and disruptive people, in order to make something happen that is actually creating value in that ecosystem, really need to do an extra. You really need to effort yourself. So I spent like one whole year at Uber, exactly 1 year, and I joined a company that was already like moving really fast with a lot of ongoing projects, with a lot of things moving on, with a culture where hierarchies are not like really important because you are able to navigate the whole organization end to end, no matter the role that you have. And you may be part of a strike team, a temporary team in which you are going to resolve one organizational problem, and you are like sitting in the table with managers, senior managers, directors, senior directors, and you're all on the same level trying to resolve a problem. And there's not a sense of superiority in anywhere in the organization. You work a lot. I mean, it's really demanding because you have a lot of things to deliver, and you're evaluated by your projects and by the quality of your deliverables. So we spend a lot of time trying to look for good ideas and execute them in the best way possible. And everything is moving all the time. So while you're trying to make one project and make it happen, there are like variables moving in the context. So you have to be like really agile, like looking for new ideas and iterating what you're doing, and like getting people on board and trying to launch something and experiment. So that's why I feel. I mean, and also you have a lot of training, and you have to work with global projects. So everything is moving so fast, so intense, so intellectual, that it felt like Uber was like doing an MBA.
Wow, that's actually very. I'm always. I've had a very interesting relationship with Uber. I would say, right. My first encounter was I was actually doing a project for Harvard Business School. I didn't go to the school itself, but one of my friends did. I was looking for work, and one of my friends said, "Hey, look, can you invite some CEOs?" So I was like, okay, sure. I was unemployed at the time, so I got this inspiration from going to a lot of startup meetups, and basically I noticed that every CEO shared their Twitter handle. This was back in what 2011, right? So this is like almost 10 years ago. And the funny thing was, I remember all the other they called them vice presidents at the time went about and they were doing cold
Mhm.
emails. So I was like doing cold tweets, right? Like nobody. I think that was kind of really new at the time. I noticed that if you tweeted, people would have to get back to you, right? Because otherwise,
Right.
the whole world will see that they're not responding. So I think I had about like an 80% engagement rate with my tweets, and then the cold emails had like 0% engagement rate. And one of the people I invited
Nice.
was Travis, actually. And Travis, I'll never forget what he said. I said, "Hey, look, Harvard wants to hear you speak. Would you be interested in talking about Uber?" Right? And he said, "DM me." Right? And then I gave him the details, and then he gave me a three-word response. It was keynote or bust. I thought, okay, so the reason I brought that up is it's really fascinating to me because I hear a lot of controversy about Uber's culture, right? A lot of the people who work there, a lot of people who even were laid off there, remain very enthusiastic about Uber, right? And I've heard this
Mhm.
multiple times from customer support that worked in Cairo to you to a lot of people. And yet Uber seems to have such a like a tarnished image, I guess, in the outside world. And where I'm most curious is I asked people why they felt that way about Uber. It was about the skills that they learned there. It was about that feeling of belonging to something, that feeling of like this
Yeah.
combined mission. And would you say that because I think this is crucial for people development, right? Like how was it that this image of Uber was so different from inside the company and outside the company, and what could be done to. I mean, like it seems a lot of I feel like sometimes like companies suffer that, right? They have a brand that they're known for outside, like investment banks, right? Maybe like they have a brand where if you can work in an investment bank, it's actually really challenging and it's a very fulfilling
Yep.
sort of uh, career. But then from the outside, people just have this different perspective on it. And how would you reconcile that in sort of like your way?
That's a really good question, and I've heard that question a lot. I mean, during my time at Uber, I had like a lot of conversation with people who was asking me about that, and specifically because I come from Argentina, where Uber is not yet fully legal to operate. So there are a lot of things going on around the drivers and the safety of the drivers. So the brand is like really criticized. And in regards to the reconciliation of external Uber image and the internal image of the company, I think that there are like a couple of things that we need to break out. Like first is that one part of the story, it is true. I mean, Uber had some cultural issues in the very first phase of the company. I think that we can say that in the second phase, because in the first phase, it was like the new and everyone was just interesting about Uber because it was a new product in the market and it was breaking through and all that. And then Travis and all the founding team, they had a huge success in their hands and they became leaders of a multinational company that was having a huge impact and everyone was speaking about. And I think that that happens when you have that situation that is really common in leadership. That is the power paradox. When people have like a really strong being power for the first time, they need to know how to manage and how to cope with power. So I think that at that point you have a lot of leaders at Uber who had like some ego inflated because they were part of something like really big and really successful, and there were a lot of behaviors that needed to be revisited before Uber could continue evolving. And you have some cases about Susan, I don't remember the name of the engineering lady that did that she came up with the article
Yeah.
speaking about some behaviors that were not like really good. And then you also had the video from Travis who was like fighting with a driver. So those were like the moments in which the Uber culture was in crisis, and it was a really big crisis. So the company almost didn't make it through that crisis, and that's when business needs to make decision. That's one of the things that I am really like confident and I'm really exposed to that business needs to make decisions sometime in order to survive. And one of the decisions that they made was to ask Travis to take a different role in the company. And they brought Dara, that is the new CEO,
Yes.
who was a guy who had like the experience to lead a company of the size and exposure that Uber had and that the Uber is
Got it.
that's when they started the second cultural journey. That is the most recent cultural journey. That is the one that we are, the people who is part of Uber and the ones who were part of Uber experience. That is a company that is actually raising the bar really high in regard to culture. The thing is that I think that some of that transformation has already went outside of the company, and if you look outside, you will see a lot of good feedback and a lot of different perspective. The business model is still being criticized because of the driver and the rate feed and how much they're making and all that about the gig economy that they are actually empowering. The same is happening with all the company that I have, delivery guys and motor boys and all the ones who are delivering products. But I think that people is most of the time forgetting and how were the conditions of those people before that industry was created. So there are a lot of criticism going around that doesn't make sense. There's a lot of criticism that had some foundations, and there are a lot of things that are changing around the culture of Uber. So, and I think that people still needs time and before they can actually understand what is a new version of the culture.
Absolutely.
And even now, I mean, I've been impacted by layoff because that's the truth. I mean, I was part of the 7,000 people that were laid off from Uber, and I'm still have like a huge appreciation for the company because what happened during my time there is I cannot forget to mention this, but Uber has the best diversity and inclusion strategy that I've seen. And I've been part of companies that have like 80 years, 20 years from different industries, and none of them have done such a huge investment in diversity and inclusion as Uber has done, and real transformation around diversity. You know, like a strategy that is really allowing people to be the best version of themselves, to be authentic, and that's something that Uber is doing like just yet again, I haven't seen any other company doing a work like that.
Definitely.
So that's the thing. I mean, there is a lot of controversial story things, new things. I don't know if this is helping, but
I'm definitely very, very actually amazed. I remember speaking to everybody at Uber, they seem like superhumans. I was like, how do you actually get so much? How do you get so much done? Like, oh, oops, I think Fabrizio. Yeah. Hello, Fabricio. I think we were having a technical.
I can hear. I can just hear perfectly.
Oh, okay, okay. I think we got back online. Fabrizio, actually, I'm very, very sorry. I forgot to introduce Alethea here. Alethea is one of our interns on the HR team, and she helped prepare some of the questions actually this morning for our discussion. I'll turn it over to Alethea now for introductions, and also if Alethea has any questions for Fabrizio. Over to you, Alethea.
Sure.
Hi, Fabricio. Yeah, so I'm Anithya. I'm an intern at Bukit Vista currently. I study psychology in Singapore. Yeah.
Nice
For
to
now,
meet
I don't have any questions, but I think probably later on.
Okay. 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 If there's no questions from Alethea, then I'll continue. I have a question that I heard. This sort of just developed when I was listening to sort of like what you were saying about the power paradox, and I've I've tried to understand that from a leadership point of view because this
you.
is actually a pretty interesting theme, which is it's also I feel like the power dilemma, right? Like you have a good idea, like surge pricing, right? It makes sense. It's sort of ultimately what everybody ends up using anyway, and
Hmm.
and you have, let's say, pushback from it could be an internal party, an external party, and it's just like you're trying to, like, let's say, roll out this program, but maybe you're not getting the full appreciation of the people that are following. And the reason I say that is because I'm directing these questions toward this idea. Um, I noticed that when I talk to different people at Uber, right, and they have a very similar experience that you did. They feel very loyal, very engaged with the company, even after a layoff has happened. And I go back and I ask why, right? Why? And it comes down to a few feelings. It comes down to, but all these feelings are distinct. Like in Cairo, in the Egypt office, it seemed to be mostly around training. I was really grateful for the training that I received, for the training that benefited me. And in other places, it was the feeling of team empowerment, getting really working on a really important mission. And so my question is then, like, as leaders, and you offer a program, right, and you expect it to engage with employees, but let's say, like any product or program, it doesn't do what it's expected to do. Would it be more advisable, in your opinion, to change the program and serve employees like guests, so to speak, right? We'll give you the program that will create the most engagement for you, or do you sort of make the more difficult decision of, I'm going to lead this way, and eventually you'll see the truth around why this would work, and that's related to the theme of, like, I think really pushing for an idea to work eventually, or more like appeasing to, or not appeasing, but creating things that just kind of like get the engagement you want, but not necessarily like actually are constructed in a way that leads.
That's really interesting, and I like this topic because when we work in people development, you always have to struggle with that. I mean, like, do you create something that people will enjoy, or will create something that will transform people's lives and that will actually create learning, right? Because people have like a really big challenge engaging in learning experiences. People is coming from an education that created some kind of trauma around learning experiences. So, and now in the auto corporate world, we need to like rewrite that and try to help people to enjoy a learning experience, to enjoy a transformational process, to enjoy a people development experience, and to actually see the benefit of it. You know, that we have adults in the corporate world, as I said, that have been training in schools that were more designed for an industrial system,
Yes.
and they just grew up like being in the passive role, learning how to ignore the teacher, learning how to just bypass the exam. So to just they come to became adults with a lot of unuseful like learnings on how to learn. So when we create products and experiences at Uber, we were always asked to just find the balance in your question. I mean, we needed to create things that were like user oriented. We needed to think about the employee as a user and to make sure that we were creating an experience that was going to help them to engage well in the best way possible with the program and with experience. Because since we were doing leadership, we had just little trainings. We just have like very few of them, and most of the programs that we managed were programs, I mean, like 2, 3, 4 months programs in which they needed to go through a series of different activities. We were like trying to hit the 70-20-10 model. So we needed to make sure that we managed programs that were engaging, that were simple, that were useful for the user, and that they were actually really participating in it. But we also needed to make sure that they felt uncomfortable in some moments of the program, because they needed to learn, that they needed to expand, they needed to gain more self-awareness, so they needed to execute things that maybe for them were not like really comfortable ideally or what they wanted. But we knew that with that methodology, with that topic, or doing that thing, they were going to be able to develop something that the organization needed to have. So we need to find like we were like always looking for the sweet spot. We never, I wouldn't say that we achieved that, but I did see on my time at Uber like an evolution, because in the first program that I managed, I saw participants like sitting on the room, like trying to just be there, like sometimes occasionally going to the cell phone and just pretending that they were paying attention and just making sure that they completed the experience.
Right.
The second training was an in-house design. We just did a lot of improvements. We simplified the pre-work. We changed the topics. We brought mood leaders to be facilitators because they wanted something that was more practical and less theoretical. Another thing that we need to change around people development is trying to make sure that we avoid as much as possible everything that is theoretical, and we go to the maximum level possible to practical things. Business cases, projects, initiatives, experiments, whatever they would put them into hands-on instead of a passive role. And the second program went better. We had a lot of good feedback around the second one compared to the first one.
Yep.
And the third one, we even simplified more. We just choose different topics. We chose a lot of videos and a lot of like dynamic resources, and we got even better feedback. But people still needed to navigate content that at first for them was heavy, like emotional intelligence, self-awareness, effective communication, PNL, situational leadership. They need to learn a thing that they didn't like to learn, but the way we structure the learning experience, it made them to engage a little bit more and a little bit better in the process. So we're still trying to figure it out. I mean, what is the best way to train adults and to develop adults in the corporate world? We know that it's not like training rooms and it's not classroom what it works. We know that it's the whole different paradigm. We still need to find which one is actually working for different corporate cultures, because they don't all work the same.
That's actually really, really fascinating. That's a few steps ahead. And in these programs, you meant in these programs, you're measuring the engagement, but the ultimate output is leadership, right? The ultimate output is, are these people able to lead better? Is there a feedback signal that you're looking for to see that? Is it like are these people getting better engagement scores from people that they're leading, or?
That's a good question. That's another good thing that Uber has in place that I think that a lot of companies are trying to get there, and Mercado Libre also has it like that. And then in the company that I'm working on right now, we are going to go into that model in which you have a pool service system in place in which you assess your organization with a certain frequency that helps you to get an idea on how people are experiencing the organization itself. And you have a survey that you run ideally twice a year. Okay?
Twice a year.
People is doing, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of companies that are doing once a year, but I think that it's not longer working.
Okay.
There are other companies that are working twice a year, and there are companies that are trying to get to a quarterly basis, which is good. I'm not quite sure if that's healthy for the organization, because things that have to do with the with leadership that take more time until you finally have the transformations, because you need to transform the leadership mindset and behaviors. Then those leaders need to go into practice and apply those changes. People need to perceive those changes, and then they will reflect those changes in the survey. So this whole cycle, it might take 4 or 5 months until you finally have the possibility to move organizational metrics. So I think that in order for you to have like an effective leadership cycle or development cycle, you need to have a survey in place in which you can assess your organization, you can assess different dimensions, and one of them is going to be your leadership behavior. And you have to define which are the leadership behaviors that you want to have in place in your organization. You measure that, and with that you have an input, so you can start designing and identifying which are the leaders that need support and which are the capability areas that they need to develop. Then you execute your plan, and you give that plan time to have an impact. And then you measure again, and you run the cycle. That's the theory. That's the theory pattern, okay? Because then you also have the second challenge in place, that is, since these are high-tech companies, organizations are moving all the time. So if you do a measurement right now, one team, you might have the chance that the same team is going to respond for the same manager in the next cycle, as you might not have that scenario, because probably the leader change, the team change, because these organizations are moving like really fast.
Yeah.
So there are companies that are choosing to go with one methodology that I agree with that. That is, you still measure the leader no matter the changes on the team. So I can measure Gene in his whole career as leader to see which are the overall satisfaction that he's getting from his team. The trick that you have there, or the problem that you have there, is that, let's say that you have a high metric in this measurement. Let's say that you get an overall satisfaction of 80% in this moment of the year, and I can measure you again in 6 months. And you took a team that it was like in terrible condition, and you get a 50% just because that team had another history, and you're the one trying to make things better.
Yeah.
But your score is moving. So like you have multiple ways to choose how to measure your leadership development and performance, but you need to be like really mindful that there's not one unique way, because you might have metrics that can help you to track consistency and to have traceability on how a leader is evolving. But you also have another thing that happening in the real world that you need to like incorporate so you can measure your leaders. But going back to your question, basically how you can do it with service system, where you can identify different capabilities that you expect to have, measure the level of development that the organization is given feedback about, and then you see how that leader is evolving and what type of development needs or program that person should go through.
Okay, got it. A specific question is around, like, I guess, when I was working at Airbnb, I remember the leadership surveys were very vague. Well, they weren't vague. They were like, how in general do you feel about leadership in the company, right? How do you feel about how is the executive team doing? Are you inspired by them? And when we designed our own employee engagement survey recently, we looked and we said, because these surveys are anonymous, and we need them to be anonymous, otherwise people won't be, telling us exactly what they feel, right? Because the surveys are anonymous, they need to be more directed. Otherwise, the next thing that happens is, what exactly can we change? So our first iteration of an employee engagement survey, we asked things about, how do you feel overall? How is things going overall? And we realized that even after you get the survey back, it's like, okay, I get a sense of the room, but what is it that I can actually take action to change? So what we've developed now is we've developed a survey that specifically HR puts out programs. So we put out like leadership development programs. We put out like the happy hour. So each program is now kind of containerized, and we ask people about their feedback for that. And Alethea, I think, has seen some of the results already for it. I haven't taken a look at it yet. But I also feel like there's this weird balance between these questions that matter and sort of like the questions that you can take action on. There are sentiments that I feel like they do matter, right? Like, how enthusiastic are you about our brand, right? But like, what are you really gonna do if you do say, we're not enthusiastic about the brand? Like what is it that we intend to actually, how do we actually like fix that? In a directed way. Otherwise, it feels like, okay, like the whole population is sick, but we don't really know who is sick. So, oh yeah, it feels like lockdown then, right? It feels like, okay, everyone's sick, so we're gonna have to just lock everyone down. And then if you take that action, it doesn't feel like it really fixes things either, right? So,
Yeah.
so I'm very curious about like this particular feedback cycle. If you felt similar struggles, or like how to actually get this a clean signal back from the feedback that you can take action on.
Sure. I think that like there's a huge challenge in most organizations around like how to manage your organizational health, because that's what you're trying to do when you implement the survey, because you want to know the health of your organization and do something about it. And I think that around the many challenges that we have is one of them is that people, human resources, human capitals, whatever you call it, it is a function that has always like getting late to the innovations or to the new practices or to having more resources than the rest of the organization. So I think that we in HR, we always have had to do a lot of things, impactful things with little resources. That's one fact. And in order to have, like, in order to keep a good monitor of an organizational health, there are a lot of things that you need to do. And there are a lot of tools that you need to have in place in order to actually do it well. And going to your question, I mean, there is one thing that I saw in Mercado Libre that I like, and I think that Uber also has it, and a lot of high-tech company are doing, is that in order for you to measure well, you need to know exactly what you want to measure. So you need to have a framework, and you need to have a strategic definition of what is your ideal culture and what is your leadership profile that you want to have. Because once you have those definitions, and those definitions are well made, and to be well made, you need to invest a lot of time and energy from the senior leaders of the organization, because that's speaking about the organizational culture, basically. So we go back to what we were speaking about. I mean, culture is everything. The pulse survey is one of the ways to measure to analyze your culture. And sometimes you have a lot of senior leaders who do not have like full or not fully conscious of the impact that this has. So they invest like little time, little effort, and they just launch it and just try to get a big and powerful insight for something that they just invested almost no valuable time. The companies that actually are doing a good job around defining culture, defining their health, their metric system, their pulse systems, their work health, and all that, they're the ones who actually are getting like good assessment and diagnosis of what's going on in the organization, and they can actually go there and identify the real problems. And all this that I'm saying is materialized that in that if you actually have a people analytics structure created, you need someone who's actually designing an analytic structure in order for you to actually do it well. And you need tools in place, and you need to be able to have a data architecture in order for you to have data that is reliable. And one of the things that I saw in Mercado Libre, for instance, was first I saw a framework that it was clear about the aspirational culture and work health that you want to have. And you have tools like Tableau, that is a system that everyone is using for reporting, but we exclusively had it for the pulse survey. So you can have the ability to do like a very specific analysis around one specific sentence and response to see the type of responses that you got, the favorability, and the leader who was actually impacted. And if you had a structure that was really big, and they say have an organization with 200 people, with a vice president, directors, and senior managers and all that, it was not that you had a low metrics for just the head of the area. You had a low metric, and you could deep dive to see who was the team that actually was creating that low metric, and you can actually take actions in the right place in the organization. So I think that.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, so there is accountability for. Okay, I see it. So you're layering essentially accountability for who's going to be part of delivering a certain cultural layer, and then you're measuring.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. And that's actually.
So what I'm saying is basically that in order for you to be really effective in organizational development and leadership development, you need to have a very big, strong architecture behind that. Like your backend needs to be a lot better. If you want to actually build a culture like Uber, like Google, like SoundCloud, like all the big companies, if you do a research and read the books around the ex-head of HR from Google, or you listen Patty McCord from Netflix, they were HR functions that had a lot of good investment behind. They had like good talent, not only HR talent. You need to have people in HR who are coming from technical functions, who are coming from data scientists. You need to have specialists in organizational psychology. You need to have a diverse profile so they can build a platform for you to actually build for the business a series of solutions that can help them to have a good, really good, deep understanding on how the organization is behaving and how to transform the organization to the next level. If you don't do that, you don't have the intention. You can do it with little. I mean, you can always do something about it. But if you want to be Google, Uber, or a big company, you need to understand human capital management as something like really more complex than what usually is thought about.
Of course.
Okay, it's not simple. You need technical, you need tools, you need investment, you need strategy behind that.
I get it. What it sounds like to me, Fabricio, is that it's almost like an internal customer base, right? Like when you think about, like, we have customers and we have like databases and Salesforce and people doing customer analytics and such, and we're trying to figure out where this customer community is going to go so that we can place products, in their journey. And we want to know how customers feel about our brand. Is it like taking that sort of mindset and bringing it inside the company?
I think that it is a must, basically, to do that. I mean, and I think that one of the companies that brought that idea and make it popular is Southwest Airline, if I'm not mistaken. That's the name of the company.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, Southwest.
Where Branson is saying that you need. It's not that customer goes first, employees goes first, because they are the ones who will take care of your customer.
That's right.
And I fully agree with that chain of command, because if you actually create a good employee experience, that employee experience was translated into a good customer experience strategy. Because otherwise, you're just trying to say, I mean, we want to be the best with our clients and all that, and you tell a story. I mean, consistency is everything. It's for life itself. And for business, is if you want to tell externally the story about your business, about your product, and you want to make the market believe that you are something specifically, you need to have that in your DNA. You need to have that indoor. So if you don't have, I mean, and right now I'm working in a culture strategy for this new company I just joined, and in all the spaces that I presented the strategy, I said that we need to have 3 pillars that is going to actually make culture strategy successful. We need to be customer centric, as well as we need to be employee centric in the same level, in the same way. Because that is going to give you the consistency to make sure that if you ask your employees to give the extra mile so we can give to the customer an outstanding experience, you need to make sure that someone internally is giving the employee the amazing employee experience so they can give that extra mile in fact. Yeah. So that's why I think that HR, human capital people, let's say whatever is called in your organization, is playing a critical role. And I think that there are a lot of human capital professionals who are not like really fully aware of the role they are playing right now, because people management and human capital management went from being something really transactional to something really strategically recently.
Yes.
And has become like even more impactful. I mean, and I think that we are really thankful about the high-tech companies, and not only high-tech companies, because you have traditional companies like GE, General Electric, Western Union, or like you have Ford and all those companies, Toyota. They were like the foundational, I mean, of the corner store for today having like really good culture and a lot of human capital areas who are creating value. But I think that the technology companies took it to the whole new level, because the tech talent has become like really valuable. So because you need to keep tech talent like really in the whole employee life cycle like onboarded, develop, and treated in the company, that we needed to do like the whole different thing.
Got it.
So I think that you need to work in consistency. Employee experience and customer experience should like be not in the same level, because it's never in the same level, but they should be in the same discussion.
Got it. Understood. There's this. I agree that I think I talked to. I remember it was co-founder Nate Lachartik at Airbnb, and I asked him, hey Nate, I just happened to bump into him when we go to San Francisco. I said, what is like the biggest difference that you faced when Airbnb was going from like 20 people to hundreds of people? And he said he said something that was quite inspirational to me, because he comes from an engineering background. I'm from an engineering background, so he made it clear. He said it's kind of like if you're growing a body and you don't have a nervous system. You really need to have like a really good nervous system. You really need to have like a good communication structure in place. Otherwise, the bigger you grow, the more disjointed it becomes. It becomes more of a mob than actually a company. And I felt like kind of interesting about that. And in the new phase, and this is where my question is going, right? In the new phase of where I see um, startup companies and technologies grow is that yes, I noticed that communication is deliberate now, right? Like we have all hands, we have town halls, we have Scrum sync ups, we even like even the events, like the happy hours, the virtual events we have. They're kind of another layer in this communication community building thing. And so after a while, I almost feel like from my perspective, I feel like this is almost a little bit sinister. I feel like I'm like the minister of propaganda here, right? And similarly, here's what I feel. Maybe it's not the right way to feel, and this is why I'm asking for coaching. It feels like at certain points you're gonna get like people who go, um, I'm not buying that. Right? I'm going to define my identity by being a counterculturalist, and you might have very effective people who are like counterculture, and then they might even inspire other people. But have you seen any like sort of I remember hearing this phrase a lot, right? Like drinking the Kool-Aid, and the reason why I say that because it is a bit of a conflict, and I don't know how to address it. Part of my 20-year-old self goes like, okay, anti-establishment's cool, like that's brilliant. That could be a source of innovation. But my more mature side goes, that's actually kind of dangerous when you have people who go, this is they see something bad about what other people see as being good, and they feel like this is pushing against their identity or something. And how do you manage these particular cases? Because I've always felt conflicted. Like, okay, we should have an innovation culture where people are free to express their ideas, but if you get too much growth in people who go, well, management's just pumping all this propaganda down our throats, and it's not really part of our this isn't what I how do you get cases like that, and how should you what should the expectations be, and how should it be resolved?
Well, that's a big challenge that you are always going to have. I mean, every company will have people who are like following the narrative that you're building, and you're always going to have the rebel ones, the ones who are like free souls, the ones who don't believe in that, or the ones who are more agnostic in everything. But maybe they're not just doing that to that specific culture, or corporate culture, or cultural narrative, or to whatever's happened there. It's just a general pattern in their lifestyle. So you're gonna have that everywhere. I think that the better. I mean, and this connects with some part of the question that you established. Like, every company will have a narrative. Every company will have their own internal communication system, and the leadership will always try to, not always, but most of the time, they try to do their best building strategic messages and trying to build consistency in the culture. Because now, if you do culture management in your company, you know that communication is one of the key bones for that to happen. And you need to have something around that, and you need to have alignment in your new leadership, and they need to communicate consistently and all that. And you create the surveys, and you highlight the good things in the survey, and you're always going to have people waiting for you to speak about the things that are not going well. And I think that sometimes you even have to like coexist with this like bias in which people is putting more attention to the things that didn't go well against the things that actually are doing well, or are like improving at like really fast speed or in huge size.
Right.
So I think that you need to take care of what companies or the surveys are calling the detractors, because you always have detractors in your company.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, you need to listen to them, because that's why I think that companies like Uber are creating or like more moving forward with this practice that is called the Q&A. in every event, where you allow employees to ask questions, whatever open question they want to ask to the leaders, and they are willing to answer all of them. When I was at Uber, I saw like many employee all hands in which the questions like were like some childish question that you had, or some claims that were like out of place, but the leaders responded anyway, because that's the energy that is flowing in your company. And I think that this is like almost like applying meditation. You need to accept reality as it is, and not judge the reality that you have, because it creates like more stress. And I live different cultures. I live in another company in which the people who were like complaining, or they were not happy with everything, and they were like maybe like really resentful with some situation, they were like treated like detractors, and they were criticized, and they were like even demonized. But at Uber, I saw a different treatment around that. I mean, Dara, who was the CEO, that he received a lot of like attacks and questions that were like really out of place, that they were not like were showing like poor judgment, and they still responded with care and with respect. So I think that the key, basically responding to your question, is respect. Respect to everyone and to everything, and to encourage and embrace the ones who are appreciating what you're doing, and embrace and respect the ones who are not maybe appreciating what you're doing as an organization, because maybe they don't understand, or because they don't want to understand. Just to give you some like great example, while Uber was going through like a really complicated moment, and we knew that the business was down by 80%, and they were like coming a lot of potential layoff, and that the numbers were not closing. There were people in those same weeks asking why the benefits were not being expanded, and they were complaining because Uber was not offering more benefits and all that. And it was like, dude, we're about to like lose like a third of the company, and there are people, and you saw that question, and you saw that question voted like 1,000 times, which means that you have 1,000 people concerned because the benefits are not being expanded in a moment in which the business revenue is going down.
Right.
You treat that anyway, and you give them the space anyway, and they even responded to the question anyway. So I think that basically is the complexity of working with humans. Humans have different perspectives. We will always have different perspectives,
Right.
and to not and to, I think that from the leadership side and from the organizational side is to embrace that with respect and with acceptance. That is part of your organization, and you need to just keep on going with your beliefs that you're doing things right, and not stress more, and just try to give them some words, because that's what you need to do. That's my perspective.
Definitely. I've always felt like that was that there's this paradox of who serves who, right? And the weird thing is,
Right.
like, after a while, it feels like leaders. I mean, I think it was Plato said this or something. Well, he had a much more dire way of putting it, but it's actually kind of weird, because it feels like if the expectation is that the employees serve the organization, or does the organization serve the employees, then if everything is right, then people shouldn't be asking questions about what happened to my benefits. Oh, we're about to like go into a recession. Nobody has any benefits. It seems like just self conscious, it's self obvious, but yeah, to still be able to deal with that in like I think a noble way is
Yeah.
I don't know if that empowers more of that sort of silliness, or do we need to be radically candid and say, hey, look, thank you for saying that, but I believe that is a very important question given the circumstances that we're facing at this moment. I struggle with that too now. Like, I wonder, okay, should I take on like my natural tendency as let's say an engineer, a man of like science, and is okay, I'll listen to it, just like anything. There's a place for even dumb questions, right? But at the same point, I realize if we harbor too much like tolerance for this, it sort of encourages. Oh, okay, all right. Let me keep on going down on this thread now. Instead of no, this is the wrong thread. You need to get back over and think about this thread. This is where everybody plays the game, not over on the sidewalk. So
Right.
in that, I guess that goes back to this idea of, do we lead or do we tolerate? Right? Do we lead or do we tolerate? Um, like tolerance is a type of leadership. I know, and
Yeah.
respect is a type, but I feel also compelled say, hey, look, we're going this way, and you need to be on this side because this is what you were hired to do, right? And I've never had a chance to actually be like the asshole, right? I've never had a chance to say, hey, look, this is, and I don't think that's good, but I've also seen where radical candor can be extremely important and extremely clarifying. So,
Well,
yeah.
that's the thing. Man. You mentioned radical candor because I think that is a really it's a topic that hit really a lot in the organizations because what is going to give or is going to take this problem to the next level in which we don't need to worry about this anymore is having more capabilities on the leadership to have honest conversations and straightforward conversations and clear conversations, but using the right language and the right words. You know, like effective communication is something that everyone should be working on. I mean, if we speak about human development and people development, communication is always going to be there, always, because we all have communication issues. We all need to learn more about communication. I think that the good leaders are the ones who communicate well. With few words, they can say a lot, and they are able to communicate clear ideas without having to go around like many circles in order to get there. So I think that sometimes when you said about like uh, why do we have the situation in which people are like sometimes complaining or having silly conversations or being dumb or being like behaving in a way that have nothing to do with their organizational context, is because there are leaders who are allowing that to exist, and there are leaders who are not able to like re-educate, okay, to the people that we have in the organizations. And even like we need to be mindful that even though that we are speaking about adults in the corporate world, we still need to do an educational work around them. And even like there's a lot of young generation that is going to the business world that they have many more. There are a lot of criteria that I need to develop, so we need to educate them in basic stuff sometime, and we need to deal with those situations and we need to embrace them. And as I say, as you said, around tolerate or lead, I think that is situational. And then I think that everything is situational in the organization. There are moments in which you're going to have to tolerate, there are situations in which you're going to have to lead, and there are situations in which you're going to have to be directive, and that's fine. Okay, but I think that any of those scenarios, what matters is that you're able to communicate well and with respect and with the right tone, with the right choosing the right moment, the right space. And I think that a lot of leaders usually fail on that. They fail either choosing the message or either choosing the channel or either choosing the way to address the situation, because there is something behind, like the back end of all this, that is emotional intelligence. Because sometimes you have a situation in front of you that gets you frustrated or anger or is triggering any emotion, that if you don't govern that, you're going to address that in the wrong way. But if you can actually govern your emotions and you can connect with something that that's in front of you that maybe for you is incoherent, but you can manage your emotions, you can connect with that with impartiality. So I think that that's one of the things that we need to help. I mean, leadership development and emotional intelligence are the two things that are going like really together, like side by side, hand by hand, because those are the things in which we invest a lot. And you mentioned about technology. I mean, in IT, where you have people that are like really good at resolving problem and being rational, the spot that we need to develop most, a lot of time has to do with human relations and emotional intelligence. That's the field in which we can transform things.
Excellent. And as maybe a final question, I'll go over to Alethea. This converging the world of IT and actually human intelligence. Alethea, you had a question about artificial intelligence. Let's go over to you.
Yeah. So I think my main question was like more on like recruitment, because I realized I saw that in your LinkedIn profile that you work in Unilever, and I heard that Unilever actually incorporates technology with like the recruitment process, which I felt was really interesting. So maybe like just to find out more about it. Yeah.
Well, we're in the early stages of artificial intelligence for everything. Okay, we are just very starting to explore this technology. So I think that everything in every part of the organization, they should start like giving their first baby steps and experimenting and trying to bring artificial intelligence to whatever is possible. In HR specifically, I think that one of the first spaces where we can experiment around artificial intelligence is in recruitment, because you can like build a lot of analytics around the information they have from the candidates, from all the digital footprint that we currently have, and you can like work with different models that can help you to predict behavior with all the information that you can capture from the history of the candidate and all the information that you can capture during the process. But I think that we are still in an experimental phase in which anything is yet reliable to make decision, or to rely 100% on the decision made by the machine. We are in a phase in which we're going to experiment a lot of different models and a lot of different products that brings artificial intelligence into the recruitment process, but it still will be monitored by the human intervention for years and years. I don't know if years, but we need to still monitor this, because there are like, as everything human related, there are so many variables that you are not actually fully like incorporated in a model, that you are not actually like making the best decision. You're making the most complete decision. You're adding a lot of metrics that, or variables that you didn't have in the process before, but it's still there. And around Unilever, my experience there, I mean, when I left the company, we were in the first phases of implementing face recognition for the T18 to get an extra report about the emotions that the candidate was feeling during the process, in order for them to get a report that was complementing the interview. So, but I mean, we were saying like we were in the phase 0 or something, okay? And then so it's like really initial and really like it's really green. Since then, I mean, this has been like 3 years. I haven't like yet seen anything new, or no, I haven't seen now. I haven't been in contact with anything new about that project. And in the companies that I've been working after that, we are experiencing and we are like speaking with some startups, and we are like exploring technologies with some specific group of candidates, but we are not yet like massifying or like fully relying on artificial intelligence to be like the owner of the process. But we do have to experiment. I mean, there's no other way. I mean, technology has come here to stay. We are in the first stage of the fourth industrial revolution, where technology is gonna take place on everything that we do. So I think that HR is like, as I said, I mean, HR is to stay behind in everything in the business. So in artificial intelligence adoption, we are like barely like playing in the sandbox. So nothing like really relevant yet to share.
Oh, oh, oh. Back to you.
Oh yes, I think yes, I kind of answered like yeah, I think it's still very like vague, but yes, interesting experimentation. Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
And just to conclude, Fabricio, if you were to put, like, let's say, one word around how successful leadership development should happen, if you're hiring people, and you're looking for, let's say, one quality, what quality would that be, and what word would, let's say, be the pillar of your philosophy around talent and leadership development?
I think that there's one word, and the only word that for me is important around leadership, that is self-awareness. I mean, I fully, I think that Freddie Kaufman did like a great. I don't know if you heard about him, but Freddie Kaufman is one of the authors that speaks a lot around like conscious leadership and conscious business. And I think that we've been working a lot of on the external world, and we have barely started to do the inner journey that we need to do in ourselves to better know ourselves and who we are and why we are the way we are. And I think that leaders need to be like really self-aware about themselves, about the impact that they have in other people's life and in the business. And I think that if you assess in any organization, and I will just like give you a high-level metrics, uh, you have like around 60 to 65% of the leaders who are not self-aware, and they are leaders, and they're still hold a leadership position.
Yeah.
And they have impact on other people's lives, and they have no clue about their own lives. So that's why I think that self-awareness is like the word that for me is like really critical for leadership, for human development itself. But I think that leadership is like really critical. I think that leadership is like really like one of the most important things that you have in the corporate world, in the world itself. I always say that leadership is one of my purposes, like development leadership, because I say that when you have better leaders in the organizations, you have better humans in society. And I think that,
Okay.
we need to invest in that, because it's not only a very human, the leader who is doing a good job on being a good leader, but also because that person is multiplying and having a positive effect in other people's life. If you
Definitely.
have a bad leader, that person is going to send back home people who is stressed, who is not happy, who is having a bad time. If you have a good leader, that leader is sending back home people who are satisfied, who are learning, who are feeling okay with themselves, or even like amazing.
And the
So I think that those are like multipliers,
definitely.
So I think that leadership and self-awareness, I like the things that go together.
Great, fantastic. Hey, we're at the end of the talk right now. So Fabricio, I want to say first, thank you so much. I think everything we've said, and I'm happy I recorded this because some of the things I'll go back over and re-listen to again. And I'll check out Mr. Kaufman's books on conscious leadership. I think that probably is one part I need to work on a lot more myself, actually, and be more self-aware. But thank you for taking time from your day, from your evening, to speak with us today, and we're very very appreciative. And we'll send you. Oh, okay, actually, I'll stop the recording at this point, and let's go over here.